special presentation based for leaders. It's about pitching in a pandemic. There's never been a more important time when it comes to just a bit of a tips and training on how to pitch during the new world. As we know that the pandemic is, when we come out of this, when we get double jabs, it's still going away nowhere in a hurry. You know, whether it be, you know, we have to get used to building rapport over Zoom. You know, we're going to see some numbers shared by the guys today about, you know, about companies and businesses not returning to the office. So this is the new normal, and we have to make ways to make connections and build rapport with our clients in certain ways. So, you know, it's a very, very important skill. As we know, people buy people, they don't buy the agency's name. So, you know, this is so important when it comes to agencies. They buy into who you are. Today, we've got, it is brought to you by the thenetworkone, our sister association in the UK. We've got Paul Squirrell and Stephanie Fox from the thenetworkone. Fantastic people and fantastic names, I might just add. Sound like my favourite story children characters. Maybe they could join the Wiggles. I always make those joke, guys, but thank you very much. You guys are an absolute asset to all of our members. And we'll talk a little bit later on about how they can help out, you know, around the world if you have a client that needs to have a global footprint or needs to do a campaign in other areas. And they're going to be joined by Simon and Kumar, who are from the Relationship Auditors. They're the world leaders in relationships and clients, and they've done a tremendous amount of studies and research. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Paul to take the steering wheel. If I could ask everyone to microphones on mute, questions in the question box, and I'll turn my microphone off, and over to you, Paul.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sam. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for your time today. We do appreciate it. And as Sam said, this has been a hot topic, and it's been a hot topic for quite a while now. And, you know, there are many angles to this, but what we wanted to do today was really run you through a few things which we hope you'll be able to take away from this meeting and use in your own agencies. So hopefully it's useful, hopefully it's interesting. We'll try and make it engaging. Put any questions you've got into the comments. As Sam said, the thenetworkone is your global network. We're now in 116 countries. It's 1,200 agencies, and many of them have media capabilities. So if you do need to run something overseas, give us a shout. I'm also delighted to be joined today by Simon and Kumar. You know, in the before time, as I like to think about it now, Simon and I and Steph actually shared an office together in central London. So you can see there's a very sort of synergistic way that we typically work together. And Kumar is in Australia as well, with you guys, so you've got a local point of reference. So anyway, what's the agenda for today? Well, these are our presenters, as you can see on the screen now. There are contact details. We'll share all of the presentations with you, so you needn't scribble away and take notes and the like. We'd like to kick off with my colleague Stephanie, and this is because we've recently, as in only just finished, so you're getting a global premiere, woo, of some new data that we have from around the world about return to the office. And as Sam sort of said there in the intro, even when you end up with a population that is highly vaccinated, as fortunately we are in the UK, actually the return to the office is somewhat slow. But I'll let Stephanie take you through what we've just uncovered. And literally we were putting this together last night, so hopefully it's interesting, it's hot off the press. Steph, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to share my screen. Bear with me for one moment. Yeah, so sorry, this is not what, bear with me. Here we go, this should be working now. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
The slides?
There's slides just as you're presenting.
Not yet.
Oh, okay. Apologies. 1 second. This is not the best way to start a presentation, is it?
Don't worry, we've seen worse. Don't worry about that.
Great. So we very recently, last week in fact, did a survey about returning to work. We were just really interested in the correlation between, you know, what countries were saying you could do versus what people actually felt comfortable doing and preferred to do. So the results are from a sample of global independent advertising and communications agencies. We surveyed everyone via email questionnaire. We have 41 countries represented in our results, and we had about 200 respondents out of those 41 countries. And as I mentioned before, the questionnaire was sent out on the 7th of September 2021. So hopefully you can all see those results there.
Yep.
Yes, great. So as you can see, so these are the global results. I'll break it down in a moment. But we asked people essentially, are at least 20% of your staff working in the office at least 1 day a week? Are at least 20% of your staff working in the office 4 or 5 days a week? Are at least 50% of your staff working in the office at least 1 day a week? And are at least, or more than 50% of your staff working in the office 4 or 5 days a week? So if you look at the top, 20% of your staff, a small amount, 1 day a week, totally different to how things were back in the before time. 64% said that a small amount of their team was coming in at least once a week, whereas 36% said no one's coming in at all, which is still a very high number. When you go to some of your staff coming in 4 or 5 days a week, that halves, in fact, exactly halves. So you've only got the 32% there versus 67% coming in 4 or 5 days a week, saying no to that. Are 50% or more of your office working 1 day a week? 46%, so a bit better, but still 54% are saying no. And when we asked them, are at least half of your staff working in the office 4 or 5 days a week? Only 17% of agencies globally said yes, and a whopping 82% said no. So, as mentioned before, totally different to the before time. And you can see a real shift in, small portions of staff are coming in maybe 1 or 2 days a week, but seems to be quite rare that over, half the staff are coming in 4 or 5 days a week. So if we break this down to IMAA, you can actually see that blue bar at the top just going straight downwards in like a vertical downward spiral when we asked, as it kind of increased, and likewise the nodes are going up. So in EMEA, so that's the Europe, Middle East and Africa, 80% said a small proportion of their staff are coming in at least 1 day a week, but only 20% said that more than 50% are coming in 4 or 5 days a week. Skipping to Asia Pacific, we're really not seeing a lot of people coming in at all. I mean, I know that you guys are in another lockdown at the moment, which makes sense. But you can see that there is no kind of for none of these questions are the yes answers higher than the no answers. And again, 50% of your staff working in the office 4 or 5 days a week, only 20% said yes, and a huge 77% said no. For the Americas, the same is true. We all often think of Americas as being, one of those places where they're kind of workaholics, and 12 days of holiday and all the rest of it. But if you look at these results, barely any of them are going into the office the full 4 or 5 days a week. For 20%, only 85% said no, 50%, 92% said no. And even when we look at our 20, or at least 20% of your staff working in the office at least 1 day a week, 40% said yes, 58% said no. So just to kind of go through those results a little bit, a few things that we found, just as thinking about what those results might mean. You can really see that there is a hybrid situation going on. So it's really rare that most of an agency staff is working in the office 4 or 5 days a week. agencies reported that yes, they had a reduced staff in the office at least 1 day a week, but as the days and percentage of staff increased, so did those no responses. And in APAC and the Americas, no, do you have any staff coming to the office, was the most voted response for every single question. So while most agencies reported opening their offices for face-to-face work on occasion, once or twice a week, flexible working arrangements seem to be the most popular. So on a global scale, the only question that received more yes than no answers was, are at least 20% of your staff working in the office at least 1 day a week? And anecdotally, we asked some people, some people just of their own volition decided to share some notes with us. Several respondents said that the location of work is decided by their staff. So one of our agencies said only 20% of our staff are going in about once a week as needs be and by choice. One of our German agencies said they introduced the 100% free choice of time and location of work for all team members in July 2020. They said, we measured KPIs and increased our productivity and profitability as well as client and team satisfaction. We will continue to operate remotely after the pandemic. Another agency said, we've opened our offices fully since last year and have given the employees the choice to go as they please. So we can see that working from home, it clearly proved to be a success during the pandemic. As things are opening up more, we're not rushing back to the office. People are managing to get their jobs done just as well, if not maybe potentially better than in the office. And this, could be due to the flexibility of working from home. People seem to prefer it. They just prefer not to come back into the office. For parents or those with other dependents, it makes life a lot easier to not have to go into the office every single day. It reduces, travel and food costs, and you can also live outside of the city or potentially not even in the same country that you're working in. So we really do expect that hybrid working is here to stay, and also not just in agencies, but in most businesses. So essentially, we do need to carry on adapting to that. I think we've done quite a good job of adapting so far, but it's clear that people are often giving their staff members the choice on what to do. People are clearly choosing not to come in 5 days a week. So we need to, this is the new normal, as I'm sure we're all sick of hearing.
Great, thank you, Steph.
Sure.
So all that in mind, can we dive into how we might cope with this in terms of how you guys can use the technology and the skills that we have to pitch in a pandemic? And we wanted to give you a few tips. So Steph, if you wouldn't mind putting my slides up on the screen, because I'm technically incompetent, as we already discovered this morning, and utterly unable to do it from this end. That would be great. There we go. Great. Okay, if we could just move to the next one, please. And the next one. So this is actually a presentation that we gave back at the height of the pandemic over in Europe, which would have been about this time last year as we were looking into the winter months, and then we disappeared into our big long lockdowns. We wrote a document about pitching in a pandemic, and you can download it from our website. There's the URL if you want it, and it has contributions. So this presentation is a bit of a synopsis of the content of that document. Next slide, please, Steph. I guess I'll start off by saying everything has changed, but nothing has changed. And really, what do I mean by that? Essentially, the pitch process remains the bit of theatre and the interaction with the client that it always has been. The thing that has actually changed, of course, is the medium and how we interact. Next slide, please, Steph. And what I mean, again, chemistry remains the critical factor within all of this, and it's the thing that people buy, it's the differentiator. And as before, this remains the same. But of course, we all know it's much harder to get chemistry across when you're talking to a little camera and you're all sat in different rooms. Next slide, please, Steph. So when we look at what's happened with the pitch, for many, many years, agencies have viewed the pitch pretty much like a job interview. You go on, you have to make a good show. But again, a lot of this relies on that person-to-person interaction and the non-verbal cues that come across when you're sat opposite somebody in a boardroom, when you're making the presentation. Next please, Steph. And agencies have used this for many, many years to differentiate themselves. They've had the pitch team, and we've all been guilty of this. We wheel in the pitch team who just go from pitch to pitch to pitch and then present the client with the rest of the agency who continue on with the work. But hey, this is what clients partly buy. This is part of the process, and this is what's happened before, and it's worked. Next, please, Steph. However, you kind of need to look at things in a slightly different view when you're having to present online and through a little camera. And you need a little bit more structure to the presentation and indeed the entire process. And a lot of the pitch brokers that we spoke to around the world said, actually, there's a need to be a lot more ruthless and a lot greater need to focus in more depth on the work, and be that creative work, be that media or strategy. And it's back to the basics of virtual pitching. So let's have a look at this. And this is a sort of step-by-step guide to things that we've been told by people from around the world that you guys could use within the agencies. And I'll sort of, start all this by saying, one of the things you do need to take into consideration is the fact that actually virtual pitching takes more time. It takes more time to prepare, it takes more time to rehearse than perhaps if you're in an office all together. There's less spontaneity, there's less rehearsal time when you're together and you don't fire off each other. And as Felicitas Lenz here from the Observatory in Germany said, and they're one of the leading pitch brokers over there, you need to be realistic about the number of pitches and the types of pitches that you're potentially going after, so you can invest that extra time in making sure that you put your all and your best into making that happen. Next, please, Steph. So what we've done now is we've broken down the pitch process into several stages, and it's the sort of before, during, and after, if you like. And I wanted to run you through a couple of little learnings that we picked up from agencies and pitch brokers. Little tips, and some of these are really very obvious. Some of them are perhaps less so, but anyway, here we go. First thing to do is don't assume that you can't meet the client. And obviously, if you have forced lockdown, then you are really rather restricted. But as those lockdowns start to lift, don't assume that the client doesn't want to get out. People have different approaches to things. We were in a meeting yesterday, and our client, our agency, was clamoring to get out, was very happy to meet us. Then also check that your team are actually comfortable to make that presentation in person. Not everybody is in a situation where they feel that they want to go out and be masked up and shake hands and all the rest of it. So are your entire team comfortable? Next, please, Steph. It's often good to choose a neutral venue, especially if you're still within sort of quite high quarantine or lockdown situations. Hotels are great, obviously. I mean, the client will not thank you if you turn up at their corporate headquarters and end up 2 weeks later putting half of their team into a quarantine because you brought COVID into the building. So neutral venues are quite good. Check the technology platform, as we proved today in a brilliant way. Sometimes the technology lets you down. Clients take it almost as table stakes that you get this stuff right these days. And, our experience generally, they tend to prefer the more corporate platforms, the Teams, whilst agencies prefer the Zooms and the Googles. But make sure you're okay with all of it. Next, please. Test it, again, as we proved today. I rest my case. Next. Yes, and as we spoke to Matthew here from the 4As, and as I said, I mean, this whole technology thing now is really considered to be table stakes. And if you cannot pitch using this type of technology, forget it. I mean, you might as well just leave. It's past it. And as Steph has said, even when we start to come out of the lockdown situation, this is going to remain the same. So get used to talking on a laptop at the end of a boardroom table or on a screen. Next, please. Structure that presentation. You really do have to think about how the structure of a presentation works a little bit more, because as I said earlier, that interaction and that stimulus in the room just isn't there, so you can't go off on a tangent. And it's a good thing to do anyway, because it makes you think more about the points you're trying to make. Next, please. The old adage, rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. There are a minuscule amount of people who can do this sort of thing off the cuff, and they are, as I say, few and far between, and they're very talented individual. For the vast majority of us, we need to rehearse and practice. Next, please. Put the emphasis within the presentation on the work. As we talked about a little earlier, this is the bit that you're presenting. You can't get the same level of chemistry, so focus in on the bit that you can really focus in, and that's making the work sing. Next. Have a backup plan when the tech fails, by which I mean, if your power goes down, or if your internet connection goes down, your computer blows up, you spill coffee on the keyboard halfway through, maybe have a spare keyboard, a spare computer, have someone else who can pick up for you. Maybe put the presentation onto a Google Drive or something so the client can access it if you need to, and you can talk them through it on the phone. Always have a backup plan. I mean, this is good for any pitch, of course. Next, please. Timing. We run our meetings now to the minute, and you'll find clients especially, they'll get to the top of the hour and they'll turn off and leave. So make sure that you time everything, make sure that's perfect. And again, this comes back to the rehearsal process. Next, please. Plan your handovers. You need to think about these types of meetings in the same way that you might do a television talk show. And the idea here being that actually it's a smooth transition. And this is partly because, of course, again, you don't have that same level of interactivity, body language and chemistry. There's none of those cues to pass from one person to the next person. So whilst it might seem a little over-engineered and stilted, actually for the person watching, it's a smoother experience and it looks more together. Next, please. And ask yourself this beautiful acronym, wait, why am I talking? And at the end of the day, if you're just sat there on the screen staring aimlessly at the camera, you have to ask yourself, why are you there? And if you are talking, what are you saying? What value does it bring to that presentation? Now, this is true, of course, of any pitch, in virtual or otherwise, but it's more so within the virtual environment. Next, please. So when you actually get into the presentation, we'll take this little acronym, which is from Mr. Bill Clinton, of course. And there's not much I recommend for Mr. Bill Clinton, but this was quite useful. Keep it simple, stupid. And I firmly believe in this. You've got a couple of ideas you want to get across, and make sure you do keep that as simple as possible. Next, please. Avoid fussy fonts. I mean, again, this goes without saying. It's the sort of thing for most major presentations. It's particularly true when you're looking at stuff on a little tiny screen. Do not assume that everybody's going to be sat there with a sort of, 13 by whatever it is, laptop screen, a desktop, or even a big presentation on the wall. They could be tuning in on a phone. If you've got something that's fiddly, there are too many words on a slide, you've lost them already. Next, please. Oh, you've done it great. Video. Again, the same principle. Video is actually pretty good playback for the most part. And, if you're embedding video or playing it on YouTube, it's normally pretty good. However, be wary. It can break down. It can glitch. And don't necessarily assume that the client's connection is as good as yours. Next, please. FaceTime creates chemistry. And, as we said at the top, people by people. And, there is a very good reason for starting a presentation with a little story and face the camera, talking to those people. Get to know them. Let them know that you're a person. Don't dive straight in with the slides. You lose that little bit of chemistry that you've got before you've even started. Next, please. Have the deck ready to transfer, as we've already said, so it's there if something goes dramatically wrong during the presentation. Next slide. Don't crowd the camera. Now, as we start to see, and I've seen this quite a lot, as we start to see restrictions lifted and some people coming back into the office, you're starting to see a lot of people come into meetings and sitting around a camera. Now, okay, this looks lovely and friendly, but actually it's quite difficult if you're presenting to watch that type of stuff. Better to have different people on different cameras. Next, please. Love the lens. Well, rather obviously, I mean, this is your only way to make chemistry. So make sure that you're looking down the camera lens. We've got a very good presentation by Bill McGowan, who works with people like the Kardashians, used to be a TV anchor in America. It's worth watching. It's on our website. Well, Bill talks about the types of chemistry and stuff that you can do to make yourself seem more appealing. And he comes, as I say, from a TV background, so he knows what he's talking about. You'll find that on the website. Backgrounds, hey guys, I mean, this is so not 2019, don't do it. It's just, don't leave it there, don't do it. Next, please. Demonstrate a connection with your team. And this can be done in a number of ways. And it can be done in the handovers that I talked about earlier. It can be done in a slightly jovial way, but keep it professional, of course. Let the client know that you are actually a cohesive bunch of people. You might be sat in different rooms, you might be working remotely, but actually we come together as a team, and you can demonstrate this by the way that you talk to your colleagues, by the way that you interact with your colleagues, and the anecdotes that you might give, and the way that you pass over from one to the next. Never speak across your colleagues. This is just bad. A, it's rude, but B, it creates a sort of audio clutter, which is very difficult to listen to and can be quite confusing. Expect unforeseen silences. And again, this comes back to the whole sort of online body language lack of type experience. And you'll often find, and I'm sure you've all experienced this by now, there are those, anyone got any questions? And the whole Zoom call or Google call goes dead. That's fine. Go with it. It happens from time to time, and people don't necessarily stick their hand up or put stuff in the chat. There's no sort of sparkiness. There's no need to reply, perhaps. So it is a thing that happens with this technology. Next, please. One of the ways you can save time is to share the bios ahead of the presentation. So the bios and the teams, and this also helps you to build chemistry and demonstrate chemistry between the people that are there. So if your bios read that such and such a person joined, they do this, and together they work with this person who's also in the agency, you can create a story via the bios before you actually go into the presentation. Not only saving you time, but also creating a cohesive team feel before the presentation starts. Next, please, Steph. Passion still sells, and as I said, people buy people. Clients buy agencies because they get excited and because they come up with great ideas. Be passionate about it, and the best person who is going to sell your agency is you. That's because you have the story, you live it, and you tell that story better than anybody else. So make sure the passion is there. You can still be passionate across the video medium, almost as much as you can be if you're there in person, but make sure that comes across. Next, please. Keep on smiling even when it goes wrong. Treat this like a live TV broadcast. We do all of our stuff live at the Network One, and Steph and I, and particularly Steph's, had to sort of handle all sorts of nightmares over the last 18 months or so with things just going wrong behind her. But keep on smiling, because at the end of the day, shit happens. So let's deal with it. But you carry on and let's go with it. Next, please, Steph. And I guess this is from Tony Spong, and Tony heads up the AAR. And for those of you that don't know, the AAR is probably the UK's leading pitch broker. And Tony has a very good point here, which is if you have a natural affinity and a natural chemistry with people and clients, the likelihood is you'll still have it through the camera. So don't worry too much. You just got to find a comfortable way to engage with them and find your way to present and get that chemistry across. Next, please, Steph. Okay, so post-meeting, what can you do? What's really changed? Well, really and truly, probably not a lot, to be quite honest with you. Okay, there are a few things that you can't necessarily do, like shake the client's hand and all the rest of it, but there are a few things that still remain the same. Next, please. So always thank the client for their time, rather obviously. It's you're there, you've used their time up, so thank them for it. Next, please. Send a copy of the presentation to the client the same day, whilst it's still fresh in their mind. They're probably seeing 3 or 4 agencies for a pitch situation. Make sure you're in there with the deck, and make sure they can receive it, make sure that they can open it, more importantly, and it's in a format that they can use. Make sure your contact details are on there. Now, I know this seems bloody obvious, but believe me, if I had £1 for every agency I've seen who don't put contact details on things like websites, I'd be a much wealthier man than I am now. I'm probably not talking to you at the moment because I'd be lying on a beach somewhere. But nevertheless, make sure the contact details are there. Make sure it's clear that they have a person. As I say, people buy people. People don't necessarily buy a business entity. Next, please. Follow up. Show you're enthusiastic. Give it a few days. Give the client a call. Is everything okay? Got any questions? Blah, blah, blah. Show you're keen. You want their business. Next, please. And I guess importantly, and you might or might not agree with this depending on your experience with pitch brokers, but make sure you keep them in the loop. Because it's actually in their interest to make sure that you get the business, of course, at the end of the day, or yours gets the business, but keep them in the loop, keep them apprised of what's going on. They can be a useful ally, so make use of them in that respect. So there's a few useful tips on how we've learned that agencies have been dealing with pitching in the pandemic. When you put the whole thing together, hopefully that sort of tells a sort of structured story. I'd now like to hand over to Simon and Kumar to run through I guess probably a little bit more about the relationship side of how you make this stuff work before, during, and after. So Simon, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Paul, and good day, everybody. My Sam, could you put up the deck, please? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay, we've called this part of the presentation Business Relationships Catch a Virus and What You Can Do About It. As Sam said earlier, we are in a very privileged position. We talk to literally tens of thousands of clients every year about their relationships with their agencies. And over the last 6 months, we've done some particular deep digging into the data, really to look at the key learnings that we've seen over that period of time. There are many, but we're going to talk about the 6 key ones as we see it. And as I say, I'm happy to take questions at the end. And Kumar, who is in Melbourne, and I'm in wet, rainy London will stay as long as anybody wants to, if they want to debate anything afterwards. Okay, so first point is really asking, is your organization fit for purpose? There have been undoubtedly consequences of the pandemic. Indeed, it seems weird that it's 18 months since COVID first hit and we all started to go into lockdown. Especially for business services, such as professional and marketing services, we saw, certainly in the UK, many clients cutting spending and agencies having to rapidly adapt, be it furloughing some staff or putting others on to reduce days per week. There has been, and there still is, a real shakeout. Now, our research consistently showed that those with the best service and the best client relationships were undoubtedly the ones that fared better. What we saw was that time poor and increasingly job insecure clients reverted to placing their work with those that they really considered to be their trusted advisors. Indeed, 2/3 of clients told us that supplier performance during lockdown was likely to impact their intentions to work with them in the future. Of course, there are challenges. Those that put their staff onto shorter working weeks often face frustrations from clients who couldn't get hold of some of the team when they needed them. From the hundreds of companies we've spoken to, there hasn't been one, not one, that has not gone through some sort of management restructure. And for the many larger corporates, they seem to be on a continual, never-ending journey of reorganization. For many, their change of structure and operations has led to clients re-examining if their service providers, excuse me, and I'm not just talking about agencies, I'm talking about law firms, accountants, anybody in the professional services, anybody in the supply chain. Are they now fit for purpose for what the client's business is going to change to going forward? So particularly in the UK, I didn't quite know what it's like in Australia, probably slightly different because you're obviously still in lockdowns. But there's been no surprise to us here that in the UK, we have seen an absolute pitch frenzy with many service providers and agencies due to the sheer quantity having to turn down opportunities to actually tender for business. So in terms of action, there are two key things coming out of this. Firstly, simply ask yourself, have your suppliers changed? Sorry, have your clients changed? Or are they likely to change? And if so, we'd suggest you take a hard look at if you need to restructure the way you actually work with them. You know, it's often true, and it was certainly true pre-pandemic, that if there was a client restructure, there would likely to be an agency pitch within 6 months. Given the amount of restructures that are going on, we suspect there will be an awful lot of pitches in Australia and Asia. And secondly, confirm on a regular basis what your clients' expectations of you actually are and how you're performing against those expectations. We are gobsmacked at how few agencies on a regular basis just confirm what clients' expectations are, and get the client to actually tell them what they really think. I think it's fair to say that your clients' expectations of you coming out of the pandemic won't all be the same as they were going into it. Kumar.
Thank you, Simon. That leads me to the second question, which is, are you nimble enough? Now, when speaking to the clients of those service providers who commission us to check out their relationships, we usually start by asking them about their expectations of those service providers. What we found during last year, when the pandemic was causing so much uncertainty in the business world, was that there was a marked increase in those clients who said they were looking for their suppliers to be agile and or nimble and able to flex as circumstances changed and developed. In fact, the proportion of clients wanting flexibility agility or being nimble from their service providers rose from 32% to 76% in terms of the top 3 things in their list of expectations. 32% to 76, 3 times almost, or 2.5 times in their top 3 things of expectations. And those suppliers who seem to be unable or unwilling to change quickly enough in terms of the working processes, availability of people, and in some cases attitude, were contrasted with those who at least made the effort to try and be agile and nimble. Now, whilst working from home does pose some challenges, we all know that. When it comes to being agile, clients are appreciative of those that go the extra mile and then find ways around these roadblocks. All of us in this meeting today, we're familiar. Each day of this new reality or new normal, it's an exercise in managing challenges. Now, within the same hour, we can go from I've got this to WTF. Am I going to do now? You know, the proverbial stuff has hit the ceiling. But think about it. The real key to the whole thing is communicate, communicate, communicate. So 3 actions coming out of this. Number 1, speak to your client and ask about their changing priorities. They will tell you. Number 2, review how well you're structured and set up to deal with those challenges or changes. And number 3 is to go to your client with suggestions before they come to you. And that whole bit of a proactiveness really comes to the surface. Simon.
Thank you, Kumar. And as we go through this, I suspect some of you are saying, no shit, Sherlock, on what we're talking about. I've got to tell you that what we're going through is so consistent amongst hundreds of agencies in terms of the UK and Europe in terms of how they're servicing their clients. Okay, number 3 then is, are you communicating in the best way? Well, we've all seen and possibly suffered from the explosion in Zoom, Google Hangouts, Teams, etc. But in the absence of being able to meet in person, I suppose it was inevitable that people have switched to virtual FaceTime. But there have been consequences. Many clients are telling us that they're spending huge amounts of their time on calls, and the consequence is suffering real fatigue. Indeed, many enterprise companies and their service providers are saying to us that they believe that this is resulting in too many meetings, and there is almost a paralysis about being able to get work done. We're starting to see a growing number of client companies such as Citigroup, HSBC, and many more starting to trial the concept of Zoom-free Fridays. Furthermore, at the start of the year, we ran a number of Relationship Radar online surveys where we asked clients' intentions about going back to their offices and also clients' intentions about visiting their agencies. By the end of April, the results showed that nearly 69% of clients envisaged going to their office only 3 days a week this year, with 9% saying they were going to work from home permanently. Furthermore, when asked about their anticipated intentions of visiting their service providers' offices, approximately a third said it was earlier to say, a third said it was unlikely, and the other third said that they would, but the frequency would be less. Interestingly, these people also added that they would like the ability to work and meet other colleagues at their service providers or agencies' offices. That's a key thing. We sense in the last few months, certainly in the UK, that we're seeing a little bit more optimism about travelling to meetings. Nonetheless, we're still seeing agencies downsizing their office space and reconfiguring office space to make it more collaborative. There is one agency group here that employs over 1,000 people, has I think 7 or 8 agencies that go to make up the group. They have slimmed their office down from somewhere in Regent Street to effectively working out of a large Regis-style office. And they are not alone. And you will be considering your office space options, I have no doubt. And what we're seeing here is this being one of the key areas that is taking up a lot of management's time. In terms of action, then, firstly, don't assume that everybody wants a Zoom call. A lot of people are telling us that an old-fashioned telephone call is almost refreshing. Secondly, we'd suggest it's worth resetting with your clients what communication methods they prefer and re-evaluating who needs to be on call. Thirdly, recognize that in-person meetings, when you can get them, are a precious commodity. For what it's worth, we picked up 3 pieces of business when lockdown started to ease because we were the first people that were willing to travel to our clients' offices or to our prospects' offices. And particularly within sectors such as the agency world, face-to-face meetings have been crucial, clearly, in establishing and maintaining business relationships. But for the foreseeable future, there will be less opportunities to meet in person. Therefore, we would suggest there needs to be careful thought about the organisation and getting to meet your clients when you can. Some agencies here are creating collaborative working spaces, so they've actually decided that the offices will be for collaboration and there will be more working from home. I think there are 2 other things I just want to add, and I'm sorry if I'm running over slightly on this, but I think it's really, really important. Firstly, we have a belief that too many agencies are being wishy-washy about what they expect from their staff in terms of returning to work post-pandemic. What we've seen in the UK is a massive rise in house prices and a lot of relocation, generally by middle management and senior management, out of the City of London and the various cities. Management have said you can come in and work when you want, which it sounds all terribly nice. But at the end of the day, we are in a service business. We exist to actually service our clients. And we believe that there is going to be a bump in the road, probably in about 6 months or a year's time, when agencies will have to be more rigorous about what they expect from their staff and when they expect their staff in the agencies. So I'm just saying that, one as a warning. Secondly, what we've seen is when people do start to return to work, there is a sense of nervousness. There is a sense of excitement in terms of wanting to see their colleagues and friends. But just, you know, Paul has talked about the basics of pitching. We would suggest you just review the basics of running a good old-fashioned meeting. I'm just writing an article now at the moment called "You Only Get a Second Chance to Make a First Impression." Agencies will be meeting some clients that they haven't met in person that they've won during the pandemic. Some agencies will be meeting clients they haven't seen for a long time. Resetting those meetings and not just breezing into them, but running them as highly professional structured meetings can only help. So, Kumar, over to you.
Thanks, mate. Okay, number 4. Are you sharing learnings from other clients? Now, you might ask yourself, this is fairly precious territory. Why would I want to give it away? It's my IP and somebody else might benefit from it. But what a number of our enterprise clients and indeed large corporates raised the issue of having to re-engineer some of their processes, which they've previously taken for granted. Now, in such circumstances, those service providers who were able to share what they've done successfully with some other similarly sized clients, plus those things that they tried which did not work were seen to add enormous value because it shortened the learning curve of those clients that were seeking those answers. So think about it. You're really benefiting, adding value to somebody by doing this. Now, the desire to hear what the service providers has done successfully for one client that could be reapplied to another was a theme that emerged across the spectrum of service providers. We're talking agencies, digital agencies, design companies, law firms, indeed accounting firms. And the reality, though, is that most clients don't see such behavior quite often. Service providers may merchandise such a thing as the fact that they share learnings at a pitch stage, but the practice then soon drops off thereafter. In fact, only 25% of clients we speak to have said that their service providers regularly share learnings from other clients that can be reapplied, but almost all of them want it. One client, in fact, told us that she inherited 2 roster B2B agencies who had a relatively equal share of business when she arrived. But the ratio has now changed to 65-35 in favor of that one agency that regularly leveraged learnings and then presented those to her. The opportunity for a service provider to do this and gain competitive advantage is simply massive. So in saying that, there are 4 actions coming out of this. Number 1, talk to your clients regarding the possible pain points they're facing. They would love to talk to you about it or share those pain points with you. Number 2, establish an internal forum within your business to review what's been done by different account groups that can be reapplied elsewhere. Number 3, proactively take successful ideas to the client, to your client. And number 4, offer to put clients in touch with other clients. Now, one of the organizations that I do this quite often here is a group called the TEC, or the Executive Connection. And they run these so-called Chatterhouse Rule sessions where managing directors of companies get together once a month, and then they share learnings with each other. Everybody knows that some of them are competitors in the room. And I've presented to this group, and I can tell you, they put a really high value to learnings because that's not something that you actually pick up, and they actually benefit with those learnings. So, and I will just carry on with my next question, which is, are you better or worse at technology? Now, here's the rub here. Over 70% of client companies consider having leading edge technology as one of the key drivers of working successfully with service providers. 70% of client companies consider that. Unfortunately, less than 40% feel they're truly up to speed on their suppliers or service providers' technological resources and or competence. Now, we've heard examples in both marketing and professional service firms or sector, how technology has given both the competitive advantage to some and indeed failure to the others. The success that I want to talk about came from an agency, a digital agency, that provided worldwide client access to an agency intranet on which were stored all their assets and collateral created by the agency, so the clients could easily download and use locally as required. On the flip side, there are 2 examples of failures. One from an ad agency that had made the shortlist for a large piece of business, only to find out at the very last stage of the pitch process that the existing technology was not compatible with the system used by the prospect. Gee, that's a pretty harsh learning. And the other example is that of a professional service firm that lost out in more than one tender by not clearly merchandising enough its sophisticated technological competence. For whatever reason, they chose to hide that. And in both instances, they were deemed failures. So 3 actions. Number 1, make sure you're on the front foot with technology and ensure you keep your client updated on your competence or technology competence. Number 2, where possible, review use of technology by your competitors. And number 3, talk to your client about the positive experiences of other organizations, technology, and what you can learn from them. I mean, this is a moving feast, so really, it's every day something new is happening, whether it's virtual platforms such as these. Indeed, in fact, I don't know how many of you have heard, just this morning, New York Times published a malware or spyware created by a sophisticated Israeli company that, without you even clicking on anything, has penetrated Apple devices. Who would have thought? Mac phones, and Apple was quick to release an update. So at the end of this presentation, please go and check your software update. You'll find 14.8. And this is technology moving as quickly as we're talking about it. Simon.
Thank you, KK. Right. Final point. Did you realize that what drives the perception of value for money is changing? Now, this came as a bit of a shock to us because the results of many surveys that we conducted during the pandemic have shown that things that have typically been used to judge value for money have been joined by new factors. Value for money appears to be becoming a little less transactional in terms of money paid versus deliverables received. What has come in are a number of soft factors. Soft factors such as the quality of staff, people's attitude, flexibility, responsiveness, and going the extra mile have become, maybe not surprisingly, but they've become more valued. For many clients, this is reflecting in a growing desire for true business partnerships in uncertain times. And it's probably why our data suggests that value for money is increasingly highly correlated with propensity to award more business alongside the quality of the team. So just a couple of actions here. Firstly, take the time again to ask your clients what they take into account when judging value for money from the services that you're providing. Continue to work to deliver on all of the soft as well as the hard measures. And then secondly, being able to actually demonstrate your value for money against the client's defined criteria. We often find that agencies have a list of what they believe is value for money, but you compare that against the client's list and only half match up. In our experience, few agencies have robust metrics in place to adequately demonstrate to their clients the true value that they bring. The true value they bring. Thirdly, and in passing and in closing, even before the pandemic started, we heard almost on a weekly basis that our own clients were talking about the dearth of quality talent, particularly at a junior and middle management level. What is happening now in the US, certainly in the UK, is there is a major talent shortage. Various figures estimate that between a third and over half people of all jobs in this country are looking to change jobs in the next 6 months. Now, this is causing huge problems for virtually every business we talk to, not just agencies, but also clients. So as economies bounce back, as they will do, the war for talent will really step up, and therefore holding on to your key staff, I could almost bet my bottom dollar, is going to be a key challenge to every single one of you on this presentation. And therefore having a think about what you're doing about it now and what you can do about it in the future will be time well spent. So final slide, Sam, just to summarize what we've talked about. Is your organization fit for purpose? Have you transformed in the way that the clients have? Are you nimble enough? Are you communicating in the right way? Maybe a few more telephone calls, a few less Zooms. Are you leveraging your learning with those clients who aren't getting out to meet other clients? Could you be using technology better? And are you recognizing that soft values as well as hard values go to make up value for money? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. conscious of the time. We've got about 2 minutes left. So I hope this has been helpful. We've taken through a process that has gone from sort of pre-pitch, pitch, then through the relationship and managing the clients afterwards, which, as you've heard, has also changed. Don't want to leave you feeling depressed about the whole thing. The world is changing very quickly. But also, I guess, we need to change and pivot with it. And that's a horrible expression. I hate pivot, but it's also very true at the moment. I think independent agencies are in a strong position. We saw at the start of the pandemic, perhaps independent agencies behind the networks because they didn't have the large resources, potentially, that the networks had to weather the storm. We believe that's changed now. Independent agencies are coming out of this in a stronger way. There are many challenges that lie ahead, and it's an unwritten future. But you are in a good position. You can win the business and you can manage the business. Now, I'm conscious that we're about running out of time, so I'm going to shut up. I'm going to thank my fellow presenters for their time this morning. It's been wonderful to have you all on the call. Thank you all for joining us. We do hope this is helpful. We'll share the presentations. And if you've got any questions, we're all available either on or offline to help out. Thanks.
Thank you, guys. Are there any questions from anyone, just whilst we have everyone there? Mobber, you're on mute, I think. Oh, Mobber.
Always. Paul, if I could just ask you a quick question. I got dragged away for 1 minute, and you had that slide up about Zoom calls, and you had background with exclamation mark. I was looking forward to getting to that point, and I missed it. Can you just quickly repeat it?
Seth, can you pop that button back on the screen?
Yeah, let me just find that for you.
It was probably not having you hang your washing up in the background, I'm assuming.
Oh, no, I think it was just about backgrounds, which was basically don't do them. Because,
yeah, right.
You know, just forget it these days. I mean, we're all quite happy to, you know, this is my home office. Actually, it adds to a little bit of the personality as well. And, you know, you can use it as comment. And I often look at what's happening in the background. It's not just the bookcase. You know, there might be a picture of somebody on the wall. It's like, comment on it, use it. And so, yeah, that was really my point.
Okay, that should be coming up on the screen in a moment if it's not there already.
Don't worry, Steph. I think we've done it. It's okay.
Okay, in case you want to take a screenshot.
We'll be sharing the deck and the recording afterwards anyway. Any other questions, guys? Well, look, okay, we can connect everyone afterwards as well. Just want to say thank you so much to Network One, to Paul and Stephanie, guys. You guys are amazing. And to Simon and Kumar, thank you so much for your insights and your expertise. Really interesting to, you know, to hear your points of view, and, you know, couldn't agree 100% with you guys. Fascinating bits, guys. We're going to share this around. We record everything now, so we'll have that as well. 4 quick things for members.